Thank you for completing that activity on interventions to reinforce the desired behavior and the replacement behavior. The next thing we're going to focus on is interventions to respond to problem behavior. And again, this is a quick review of the material that we identified in Module 4. So the two main responses to problem behavior should be first, very importantly, to redirect the student at the first signs of problem behavior, redirect the student to use the replacement behavior. This is really critically important for trying to avoid escalation. And the next focus is then on minimizing reinforcement for the problem behavior. So as I just mentioned, at the earliest signs of problem behavior, as soon as that student starts to engage in the early signs of problem behavior, we want to redirect the student to utilize the replacement behavior so that we can prevent escalation and get their needs met. And so remember, the replacement behavior is going to meet the student's needs, the function that the problem behavior is serving. And so if we can give them a different way to access that and get their needs met, it should reduce their need to use that problem behavior and escalate their behavior. So the example here, during independent work, Annie often talks to get teacher attention. So if she's ignored, Annie will begin yelling and throwing materials and escalating her behavior. So in this case, at the very first signs of Annie's yelling and disruption, we want to immediately remind her how to appropriately get adult attention, how to request that appropriately. And then as soon as she does request that attention, we're going to praise her after she uses that replacement behavior. We want to be very clear to Annie that you got the adult attention for engaging in the appropriate request, not for engaging in problem behavior. So bonus question here, looking at Annie's scenario where she's seeking teacher attention, what type of a reminder or prompt might Annie's teacher want to use to remind Annie how to request adult attention? So what we want to see here is, because the student is seeking teacher attention, we don't want a prompt that's going to provide a lot of teacher attention or very rich teacher attention. And so it's oftentimes good to have a prompt that you can use with Annie that you can deliver in a way that really minimizes teacher attention. And so you don't want a prompt where you're going over and you're saying, hey Annie, you really need to calm down, and you remember you need to raise your hand and ask for teacher attention, because there she just got a load of attention. So what we want to be doing is we'll give her lots of attention, but we might use like a visual cue or a prompt. We might like raise our own hand or point to a sign on her desk or something, but we use a visual prompt or something that reduces the amount and the richness of the attention that she'd receive. Then as soon as she requests attention, we'll go over there and we'll just lavish her with attention. So the next thing is minimizing reinforcement. And so if you remember at the beginning of this module, we talked about our interventions can do one of three things. They can make things better, have no effect whatsoever, or they can make things worse. And so we first and foremost, we want to make sure we are not continuing to reinforce the problem behavior, because if we continue to reinforce the problem behavior, the student is not going to give up the problem behavior for the replacement behavior or desired behaviors. And so we want to make sure that we don't allow the problem behavior to continue to work or to pay off for the student. And so we want to minimize or possibly even eliminate access to the reinforcer that's the function of the problem behavior. So if you look at again the handouts on page 5.3 and 5.4 of the manual, the participant guide, you'll see interventions like for escaping or avoiding work or task. We really want to make sure that the student doesn't get to miss work or avoid work or miss instructional time after they engage in problem behavior. So we want to limit the amount of time they miss work or miss the instructional time, and at the very least we should have students make that time up and or maybe stay later and do the work, but they need to learn that they don't get off scot-free and then they don't have to do the work or make up that time. And so we want to make sure that they learn, hey, you can misbehave now and you might get out of the work for a short period of time while your behavior gets under control, but you're going to have to come back and do that work. And then on 5.4, you can see examples for minimizing reinforcement if students are seeking adult or peer attention. And so in this case, if we can eliminate, or probably more likely minimize, the amount of attention a student receives for engaging in problem behavior. So if a student's engaging in problem behavior, we want to limit verbal interaction and explanations. We want to avoid power struggles. Power struggles give a lot of attention in response to problem behavior. And so, like I mentioned earlier with the example for Annie, we might want to create a visual signal or a cue to the student to use the replacement behavior instead of using a verbal interaction. We can do things like limiting eye contact, or kind of limiting interest a little bit in response to problem behavior. But again, we want to go back and make sure that we provide lots of attention when the student's engaging in the appropriate behavior. If the student's sent out to the hallway or the office, we got to make sure other teachers and staff know that, hey, this isn't the time to talk to the student, because they thrive on that attention while they're out in the hallway. So if you see a student here in the office or out in the hallway, we want to make sure we limit attention, and let's not talk with or engage the student during those times when they're in trouble. And then teach with peer attention. You might have to teach the peers to ignore the problem behavior and walk away. Sometimes you might even have to put incentives in place to encourage them to ignore the student's negative behavior. But along with that, like I mentioned, that along with minimizing reinforcement, this always should be combined with high rates of reinforcement when the student is engaging in the appropriate behavior. So like in the example I just mentioned, we may encourage the peers to limit attention when the student's engaging in problem behavior, but if the student's engaging in appropriate behavior, we want to encourage the peers to actually make sure that they're giving attention and encouraging the behaviors that we would rather see, the desired behaviors. So here you can see kind of that example. Darcy engages in problem behavior that results in peer attention. We might have to encourage Darcy's peers so they get duck bucks if they ignore her inappropriate behavior. And then equally, we want to encourage the peers to give lots of attention to Darcy when she's engaging in the appropriate behavior. And this should also, Darcy may also be getting social skills instruction, and so we may want to encourage the peers and create scenarios and opportunities for peers to interact with Darcy so that she's, again, reinforced for engaging in some of those pro-social behaviors she might be learning in social skills instruction. All right, so we've got a couple of examples here. You can see we're going to have you kind of think about what's the best strategies or responses. So this is a scenario for avoiding and escaping difficult tasks, and we'll focus on responding to problem behaviors. So we're looking for the two best strategies here. So when Pam is asked to work on long division problems in math class, she argues, refuses to work, and uses profanity in order to avoid or escape the difficult task. So we want to think about strategies that redirect the student back to the replacement behavior and make sure we're minimizing reinforcement for the problem behavior. So first one, student is sent to the office for using profanity. What do you think about that one? So that one is deeply problematic. That is an example of making things worse, the contraindicated strategy, because we're actually we're rewarding the student. They use profanity and they get to be sent to the office and avoid the work. So we're giving them exactly what they want. We'd expect that to actually maybe increase the behavior and the problem behavior in the future. So let's look at the next one. At the first signs of arguing or work refusal, the student is redirected to raise their hand and ask for an easier task. So I'd say that's a pretty good strategy, right? That's our redirection example. That's a classic redirection example. So it's a redirection to the alternative behavior, raise your hand and ask for an easier task, and we're doing that at the very first signs of arguing and work refusal. So that one's very good. After initial arguments and profanity, the student is ignored and left alone to avoid further escalation. So that's another example of the contraindicated strategy. This actually is giving the student exactly what they want. They do a little arguing, throw a little profanity out there, and then we let them be, and they get to avoid the task the rest of the period. So that's likely to continue and to maybe even get worse because the student's getting exactly what they want for those problematic behaviors. They're learning like, hey, this works like a charm. Next one, student must stay in to complete the worksheet with the teacher during recess. So that's a good example of minimizing reinforcement, right? So the student may be able to escape the task in the short term, but they're going to have to make up that time and actually work on the worksheet with the teacher during recess. So that's minimizing the reinforcement. And whoa, I kind of jumped ahead here accidentally. So clearly the last one isn't such a good strategy. After the problem behavior, the teacher calls the student's parents to discuss Pam's behavior. And I mean, that's not a bad thing to do. It's actually something you would probably do early on. But if Pam is really kind of a student that we're looking at tier 3 interventions and a individualized behavior support plan, that's one of those interventions I would probably think of as fluff. It's probably something we've done already, hasn't really made an impact. I would hope we've done that already. Hasn't made an impact and doesn't directly address the function or the needs that have put Pam in this position. So that's one of those interventions I kind of see as fluff. It's a good tier 1 intervention, and it might work with some kids, but if Pam's really serious about her behavior and avoiding the math tasks, it's probably not going to be sufficient. All right, we've got one more example here with Ronnie, and Ronnie likes to engage in problem behaviors to get peer attention. So again, we'll be thinking about how do we redirect problem behaviors to use the replacement behavior to get peer attention, and how do we minimize reinforcement. So what are our two best strategies here? So read through this during independent work. Seat work, Ronnie makes inappropriate noises, makes faces at peers to obtain a peer attention. So the first one, teacher speaks to the student in the hall and reminds him of the classroom rules. So what do you think of that one? I think that's not the best strategy. It's one of those I would probably classify as fluff. I probably wouldn't expect it to make a great difference. It's something that, hopefully we would have tried previously with a student, and it's probably a decent tier 1 response to problem behavior. But for Ronnie, if he's a tier 3 and we're talking about individual student intervention, it's probably fluff. It's not directly addressing the function or what's going on with Ronnie. In part because he really is seeking the peer attention. So 2, peers explain to the student that he is being disrespectful. So that's one of those contraindicated interventions, right? The student is getting exactly what they want. He engages in problem behavior, and the students are right there talking to him, so he's getting lots of attention. The third one, the student is reminded that his parents will be called if he continues to behave inappropriately. That's another one that I'd kind of see as fluff. It's not directly addressing his desire and need for peer attention, and it's not a good redirection strategy. Peers are taught to ignore the inappropriate behavior. That's a good strategy for minimizing reinforcement. We would also conversely want to make sure the peers are taught to give lots of peer attention when Ronnie's engaging in appropriate behaviors. And finally, when the student begins to engage in the problem behavior, is immediately prompted to appropriately ask to work with the peer, and that is our redirection strategy at the first signs. Redirect the alternative replacement behavior. All right, so activity number 6, as you see below, we'd like you to describe how you would redirect problem behavior and minimize payoff for the inappropriate behavior for the vignette below.